Hello, this is Michael McCarthy, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to use Ornatrix and export out using Alembic. This is a new feature of Ornatrix, and it really opens up the capabilities for pipelines that use other software than 3ds Max, or even if you wanted to just export and cache out your hair and use 3ds Max with Alembic. So to do this, first you can see that in the viewport I have some hair with some kind of windy dynamics and other things on here. We can see that we have a pretty nice viewport preview and a few hairs in the view. I'm going to actually go down to hair from guides, and I'm going to reduce the amount of hair that I have. So I might go to 150, and I'll just turn off my mesh from strands at the top to visualize that in the viewport. And the reason for this is if I'm going over to Maya or some other application that supports Alembic cache, then I may want to be generating my hair over there, and these will be the curves or splines that I would use to do so. So in order to do that, I'm just going to select my Ornatrix hair object, go to Export, Export selected, and say OX hair. From this little drop down, you'll see that you have the Ornatrix Alembic.abc option, and we'll save that out. In this case, we don't need any or have any animation, but if we did, we could export that out as well. Now I'm going to go over to Maya. And in Maya, I'm going to go to our pipeline cache, Alembic cache, and say import Alembic. From here, I can choose the ABC file that I saved and just import that in. And you see that I'll get our hair here and the number of curves that are there. One thing to be cautious of is if you're in the attribute editor, all these attributes for the curves will load. So that is something that to kind of watch out for. Now that you have these curves in here, you can render using Maya hair, or use these curves to generate hair that way, or use any other application that you might use to generate hair. Just go back to 3ds Max, and I want to take a look at some other pipeline options if you happen to be using VRay. So I'm going to have my hair here, and I'll actually go back down and I'll set this to 5K. We'll take a look at what that looks like. So you see we get a nice bunch of hair. Now in this case, we're actually going to just take all of our hair, our dynamics, animation, and we might go over to Maya with it, and we're going to use VRay to render with that. There's a couple of different ways to do that, and the first basic way is to just do it as curves. So we'll try that out. I'm going to turn this back off. Make sure I have my render settings here chosen, or the top of the stack. We'll go to Export, Export selected, and I'll call this OX hair 2. I don't need any animation. And we'll go back over here to Maya. I'm going to delete this, go over to Pipeline Cache, Alembic Cache, and import Alembic Cache. So you see our hair object come in. Again, you want to be pretty cautious of not being in the attribute editor here, because all those curves will load, and you can see that we have about 5,000 of them. And we want to render these out. Now with Maya, we can do this real quickly with a little render curve option. Go to Create, VRay, and under Renderable Curve, you can say Apply Single Renderable Curve Node. And this will allow us to be rendering with VRay. So I'm going to go in here, make sure VRay is chosen, and just click on Render. And you can see that this renders out. If you wanted to put a hair shader or something like that on it, you could, and you'd have your curves in here. Now the next thing I want to look at is a little more powerful way of dealing with Alembic caches when you are rendering out with VRay, and that's to use the VRay proxy object. So I'm going to delete this and go back into 3ds Max. Proxy object is able to deal with much more hair, and it has a great pipeline for visualizing it in the viewport and having all that hair render out. In this case, if we were going over and rendering in Maya with VRay, I would definitely recommend cranking up the hair amount. So maybe we'll say 15K for the moment, and you can see all that hair kind of come in there, should settle into place. If we deselect and zoom in, you'll see that we have some really nice detail on this hair, and quite a bit of it. I'll just zoom back out. I'm going to turn off my mesh from strands and go to export this. So we'll export, export selected, and this will be our third attempt here with much more hair. We don't need animation. And we'll go over to Maya. So now in Maya, we're going to render this again with VRay, but this time we're going to use the VRay proxy. So we're going to go to Create, VRay, Import Proxy. I'll click on the little folder and grab my ABC file, because VRay proxy now supports Alembic caches. I'm going to say OX hair will be the name of this, and just click on Create. You'll see our hair come in. Now, one of the great things about this is you saw that we had 15K hairs rendering out there, and you can even do a lot more than that. We don't necessarily need to in this case because this will render at a pretty good resolution with all that hair. But you only preview what VRay asks you to, and if we do go over into the attribute editor, you can see that we have a hair preview and the OX hair VRay mesh. This is really nice because when I scroll down here, you can see that VRay has an option under the Alembic proxy parameters for our hair. And you see that we have the hair width multiplier, and we also have the preview hairs option here. So right now we're just previewing 500 hairs, but we can crank that up or down as we wish to just see what we need to see inside of the viewport, which is a really great feature of VRay proxy and Alembic cache working with this hair system. We definitely worked very closely with Chaos to make sure this was a nice, seamless workflow. So we're going to just grab it, and we could just render this out right now. So if I click on Render, you'll see that we get that nice amount of hair. And another thing you'll notice is that as far as the proxy goes, it's understanding the Alembic cache parameters for the taper at the end and some other options, which is really good. Let's just create a quick light in this scene. So I'm going to go into these views and just kind of frame them out. I'll go to Create Lights, and I'm just going to choose the VRay rectangular light, which will be popped in there. I'll just move this up quite a bit. And I'm also going to rotate that around slightly. And maybe I'll move it in the top view here. So let's take a quick look. Yeah, that's pointing down. The other thing that I'm going to do is in the light settings here, I'm just going to make this a little bit larger because this hair came in rather large. And we'll set this to 100 by 100. And now when we render this out, we should be able to get some nice light on our hair. One thing we want to do is create a nice shader for this, which VRay has a great shader inside of Max and Maya for that. So I'm going to move this light up a bit. We certainly don't need it that close. And let's go into the rendering editors, Hypershade. And I'm just going to choose the VRay hair material. So we'll go down and choose VRay material hair 3. Drag that onto our hair object. And maybe we'll turn on our global illumination. So I'll go to GI, turn it on. I'm going to have brute force for the primary bounces and maybe light cache for secondary. And then we'll do a quick render. So this will go through. You can see our hair is looking pretty nice, and we have that full render of the 15K hairs there. I'm just going to kind of zoom in here. Let me bring up my safe frame or film gate. And inside here, I'm going to choose our progressive sampler. So we're going to go to the VRay tab, and under sampler type, choose progressive so that we can render this out. Now we'll get instant feedback as far as what the hair is going to look like and how it's going to be sampled down, and you'll see eventually it'll get to a really nice clean result where we can see the global illumination bounces and the hair looking very nice in the render. So this is how you can bring your hair that you've styled, groomed, and animated even inside 3ds Max over to Maya. And if you have a VRay pipeline, you can bring it over and render it using the VRay proxy and get that full hair while having a nice preview in the viewport and animation out of your hair. So I hope that you like the Alembic feature that we've implemented and the options to render that out inside of VRay. Thank you very much.